in the European Parliament just now, and they were talking about vegetarians, weren't they? Yeah. And a thought occurred to me. I thought, let's supposing the National Federation of Meat Traders, that's the umbrella group of butchers, sent out an invitation to the local vegan society and all its members individually and asked them to come along to one of their do's. What would they think? And then let's take it one stage further. Let's suppose these imaginary members of the local vegan society actually turned up at the social gathering, with food of course, of the National Federation of Meat Traders. What would they think, and what would the meat traders think? Now, if you're wondering what's he going on about, has Europe finally got to him and sent him a bit round the bend? Well, if you substitute nationalist for vegetarian and EU for National Federation of Meat Traders, I think you'll start to get the drift. Because us being invited here is a little bit like vegetarians being invited to a butcher's gathering, isn't it? Yeah. You know, we're not exactly on the same wavelength as they are. Of course, I was invited here by 120,000 constituents, including many of you here. You were invited here, I suppose, technically by me, but before I feel too kind about having done so, of course they're footing the bill, not me. So it's much easier, isn't it, if you extend invitations and you don't have to pay the bill. It's much easier to do so. But the question we've all got to ask, in a way you might ask yourself, what am I doing here? And I might ask myself over a longer period, what am I doing here? Well, I suppose you're here for the trip. You know, it's been a journey down, a bit of an arduous journey, and losing night's sleep and all the rest of it, but quite a convivial gathering last night, I would imagine, after we left. I hope it was convivial before we'd left, but it was convivial after we'd left, I'm sure. We'll go for a lunch in Brussels. One of the nicer parts of Brussels, incidentally, it'll be near the Grand Place. There's a little bit of Brussels, it's probably about less than a square mile, that is really beautiful. The rest of it, well, I won't use the expression in polite company, but it's less than beautiful. But the question is, what am I here for? Well, my aim is to make waves. There is a difficulty, though, and that is that, as the employee here earlier of the European Union said, I'm one of the unattached group. Unattached group sounds as if I'm falling apart at the seams, doesn't it? Or possibly likely to sort of fall off the edge. What it means, of course, is that if you have 25 MEPs from 7 different countries, you can form an official group and you get official funding. Well, that used to be 20 MEPs from 7 different countries. They raised it simply in order to prevent the nationalists from forming a group. As it happens, which silly idiot's left his phone on? Again. This is it, isn't it? What a fiasco. That's it. We'll turn it off, I think, shall we? Yes, that's it. Right. It used to be 20, but they raised it with the express purpose. It was Richard Corbett, MEP for Yorkshire. I ought to say Richard Corbett, former MEP for Yorkshire, because I replaced him. He was the one who initiated this idea. He thought, what a good idea, see if we can get one over on the nationalists. We thought, what a good idea, let's see if we can get one over on Richard Corbett. But there you are. So, as a member of the non-attached group, what rights do we have? Well, not very many. There's one particular body of which we're not a member. The rule book says we're not a member. That's the Conference of Presidents. The Conference of Presidents is the group that decides who has a right to speak, how long they have a right to speak for, and when they have a right to speak for. Well, I think I can sum up their attitude. They decide that we speak last and we speak least. So we have a shorter time to speak, and we only get it towards the end of the debate, or at least after one person from each of their groups has spoken. But notwithstanding that, we are making an impact, because the one thing we can do when we're here, we're not really going to be able to have much legislative effect, stopping things happening. One thing we can do is to talk. And even if they restrict us to a minute, you might think, well, you can't say much in a minute. Actually, it's a good discipline. You can reduce something, you listen to me for about 15, 20 minutes and think, oh, we should stuck to a minute. But, you know, if you really discipline yourself, work out exactly what you want to say beforehand and time yourself, we do this, time it to the second, you can get out your sound bites, get over your message in a minute, much more effectively than you would if you went on for 10 minutes and a quarter of an hour because people have forgotten what you've got to say. And do we get an opportunity at this? Yes, we do. On the one hand, in what they call the plenary session, that's the full Parliament. That's the thing you saw just now. Although, in fact, most of the parliamentary meetings are held in Strasbourg, you know, where we've got an equivalent one of those. So that's a bit wasteful, isn't it? A whole Parliament in Brussels and a whole Parliament in Strasbourg, except that we usually only use the Strasbourg Parliament. Very rarely we have an odd half day in the Brussels Parliament. But in that plenary session, we can intervene in debates. We can put in for a 1-minute speech at the beginning. What can that be on? Anything. On one occasion I put it on democracy in the EU. Said, you're always talking about lack of democracy elsewhere. Have a look at the lack of democracy in our countries. I mentioned Hungary, I mentioned Belgium, I mentioned Germany, I mentioned the United Kingdom. And they had to listen to it. In addition to that, there's a catch the eye procedure. The only difficulty is, you remember that, you saw the chamber, it sort of went round like this, didn't it? And there's the platform at the top. Well, they stick us over here. So the person presiding over it, even if he wanted to see us, would find it very difficult to. So to begin with, we were sort of waving our papers, hoping we would catch their eye in our naivety, and of course they didn't. So I thought, blow this for a game of soldiers. I got a bit of paper, wrote, I want to intervene in this debate, put my name down, tore it off, went out, right round, out of my place here, right round the back, onto the platform, gave it to one of the secretaries, and that's what I do every time now. So catching the eye is catching the secretary now, and it does work. They can't avoid it. And sometimes we get an opportunity to take part in debates. Nick put in for a debate on the EU-Russian summit the other day and got his bit, and explained how the EU was sort of building up quite deliberately for conflict with Russia, when in fact our national interest calls for no conflict at all with Russia. It's not a communist regime anymore. Might not be terribly nice, might not be terribly democratic, but that's not really our business. What is our business is that they have energy and we could easily come to a deal with them. But apart from the plenary session, there are the committees. Now, every MEP is a member of 2 committees. They're a full member of one committee. I'm a member of the Constitutional Committee. That's the one that considers these treaties, like Lisbon. The other one is Human Rights, Justice and Home Affairs. I'm the reserve member of that. Now, I was in these committees this week, both the AFCO one and the LIBE, that's the Civil Liberties Committee. Now, in the Civil Liberties Committee, there are